All right, here we go. OverDrive off and running. TSN 1050 on the TSN app, your home smart speaker, and up on TSN 4. Bryan Hayes, Dave Feschuk of the Star in here, and there's my main man, Al's brother, a.k.a. Michael DeStefano. Not the other way around.
No.
Right? It's Al's brother, a.k.a. Michael DeStefano.
And now we can call him Uncle Al's brother.
That's right. Congratulations to the whole family.
Congrats.
That's amazing stuff.
Yeah, baby Luca came last week, but yesterday I was back down. I was back in town. Different story. But I ended up having to go back to Niagara. We had a nice family dinner for the first time with new baby Luca.
I love it.
My father, the one who cooks, cleaned his chicken. We had a great chicken
No
parmesan
brisket?
dinner.
No brisket.
No brisket. That's my cousin.
A little bit
Cousin's the
disappointing
brisket.
you didn't go brisket, but chicken parm,
It's an
that's a
Italian
personal
sausage.
favorite of mine.
You make a killer chicken parm, don't you?
I make a killer lasagna, although I can mix in a parm if
Can
need
you?
be. Yes, I am a man of mystery in that kitchen. You never know what you're going to get.
Guys, I tuned into those meat rankings last week, fellas. That was some riveting radio.
Al's brother was crushing it, and he was talking about brisket, and he was shouting out his cousin, who apparently makes a world-class brisket.
Superb.
And he claims it's got a high ceiling.
Love that.
Right, which is a great scouting report for Al's brother, I think. When you start applying combine vernacular to food rankings, I think it really works, especially in the world that we live in.
Absolutely.
So I had a great appreciation for that. And I'm glad you liked it too, Dave.
Yeah, great stuff. I mean,
thank you.
I mean, it got me, like, I was actually, like, I went straight to my local barbecue sandwich shop and got myself a brisket sandwich. After that,
that's what we're doing.
See, we should be getting residuals for that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
You got to get a sponsorship deal.
Yeah, someone's got to hook us up, man.
Let's
Come
work
on.
on that. Anyone, let me know. I'm open for business.
Okay.
Any meat shops, I'm open for business.
I love it. Yes, maybe bring the baby along. It's a whole meet and greet. Now everything's coming together for Al's brother.
Baby Luca needs new shoes.
I love it.
Uncle Al's brother's got to provide.
That's right. That's right. Well, it's good to see you guys. And Jays are off. They took 2 of 3 over the weekend in San Francisco tomorrow night. So we'll get to that throughout the afternoon. I think tomorrow they'll be battling with the men's national team, though. Canada, Argentina tomorrow night down in Jersey. And Matthew Shinetti will join us later in the afternoon. And Shinetti, I guess, reporting and just sent a tweet out like last hour that Argentina is using the Jets locker room because they're playing at MetLife. So Messi's in like Aaron Rodgers' stall. I think that's a huge benefit for the Canadian team.
Yes.
Like that completely spins the tables, in my opinion, to a point where it's basically a pick 'em now. If not, Canada should be favored. Because if you're affiliated with the Jets at all, that can't be a good sign.
Bad mojo.
That's like Messi's been over here long enough. He's been here for over a year. You would think he would step in and say, no,
thank you.
Giants, like we're not in here. I'd rather get dressed
Give me
in
the
a
locker room Brady suited up in for all those years, please and thank you.
Exactly. Give us a visitor's locker room where Brady and Belichick and the boys used to come here and crush the New York Jets. But I think that's great mojo for the Canadian team tomorrow night.
Well,
and we need something breaking our way. We understand what we're up against tomorrow night. Argentina's the best team in the world, best team in the tournament. And, they met them in the opening of the tournament. They held their own the first half, and then in the second half, they're on their heels. They lost 2-0. But they're all saying the right things. I saw Richie Larea say yesterday, it's like, we feel like we're a different team now, and I love the approach and the mentality. It's like, we're here to win it. We think we can win it, and if you don't believe that, you're toast.
Well, the way they've played, though, like the proof's in the pudding. Like they're putting their money where their mouth is by going out there. Like that game on Friday, outstanding. An outstanding soccer game. And look, I'm not Mr. Soccer out here, but I can tell you that, I haven't seen that team play that well, since I've been watching them. I thought they played fantastic. They controlled pace. They had so many opportunities, just, couldn't finish as much, but they could have had 3-4 goals in that game. They take that same mentality, and I get it. Venezuela, Argentina, 2 different teams. But you take that mentality where you are on the attack. And look back to a couple weeks ago when they played Argentina. That was a pretty close game.
It was.
Now, Crepeau had to make some big-time stops, and Messi missed. And yes, it could have been ugly if it wasn't for a couple of key saves. But they were in that game right until the bitter end. So they've got to take that, plus the steps that they've taken in the few games since then. They got to feel pretty good.
Absolutely.
I like that they feel good about tomorrow night.
You have to.
Well, they got nothing to lose. I mean, it's like you're playing the immortal Messi, who, by the way, is going to be in the locker of the very mortal Aaron Rodgers.
And the
I mean,
New York Jets.
I want that. I want that ayahuasca residue rubbing off on Messi and the boys. I want the dark room retreat rubbing off.
Me too.
On Aaron,
Get
on
Robert
Argentina.
Saleh in there for a pregame tune-up for the boys. That would go a long
Seriously.
way for Canada.
Think about that. Like, you do not want anything. If you're a 37-year-old Messi, do you want anything to do with 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers, who played 4 snaps last year?
No.
Hey,
Snapped his Achilles.
I think it's a great sign.
Like,
I'm really coming
I think
around
you're
here.
right.
Yeah.
I think there's a massive, massive symbolic value.
bad
to this.
juju in
I
that
love
room.
it.
Bad
There's
juju in that room.
Really bad juju in that room.
But
So-
let's face it, like, there's a beauty to being the underdog here because, like, there's a lot of pressure on Argentina right now.
Completely.
They've got the garden path
And
here.
Brazil's out.
Brazil's,
and
yeah,
it's,
exactly.
Colombia and Uruguay are very good teams. One of them's going to meet them in the final. But this is Argentina's pathway. And what I'm sure you guys have noticed and what I've noticed is the reporting, when translated, is how do you lose to these guys? Venezuela, how do you lose to these guys? Peru, Chile, how do you draw them? And like Canada is so disrespected on this level.
It's the hockey nation. How we
the
losing
hockey
to the puck
nation.
guys?
How do you lose to a guy? And let's, be honest with ourselves here. It's not like we have a rich history. You got to be clear. It's not
Right,
like we have a
right.
rich history here. So we're trying to overcome our own past as a soccer nation. On the men's side, the women is a completely different story, clearly. But on the men's side, it was a long time since they got to the World Cup. We know once they got there, they got skunked. It was kind of a bitter taste in your mouth. And more often than not, the stories surrounding this national team is about what's going on off the pitch and the politics and do you have funding. And with that win the other night, I read that the national, or I guess the Canadian Soccer Association, gets like $8 million or something like that.
Yeah.
Like big influx of money, which again shouldn't be an issue, but it is with this team.
They were nearly bankrupt. this year.
Exactly. It is an issue.
It's a
It
huge
shouldn't be, but it is an issue.
I mean, didn't they have to like crowdsource money for Jesse Marsh?
yes.
Like, isn't that what ended up happening?
Yeah, MLS teams and like there were like Canadian club teams and
Yeah.
stuff that had to pitch in to get Marsh over here. And obviously it's worked out very well, so far.
Very well.
And I think it leads to 2 more matches where even if it doesn't go your way tomorrow night, you're playing for a third place match over the weekend. And at a minimum now with that win over Venezuela, it's positive vibes coming out of this tournament moving towards 2026, where it could have gone the opposite way. Where if they got dummied in the group stage, didn't get through, or got beat up bad on Friday night, it's, really kind of a negative feeling. Like, what's going to happen when you get to the World Cup? It feels like such a pendulum swing just over the last 72 hours alone.
Well, I got a question for both of you guys. You talk about a pendulum swing. How different is today's conversation if Alphonso Davies did what he did in the World Cup and misses that penalty and they lose the game?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's a
Like
great
that was
point.
big for him,
so
big
and-
for the
and
program.
I know that I felt the nerves. I couldn't imagine
great
Alphonso
penalty.
Davies, and he just put that one right in the back of the net. Like
Yeah.
no issues. What he just ice in his veins.
That's what you want out of your
scored.
captain and your
That's what
best
you
player.
needed.
Yep.
And you
No,
know
it
what?
was a
They've
great
been
moment.
there's been a lot stacked against Canada. You can make the case that you've been hearing about the smaller fields, slightly, more, not so friendly confines, which doesn't really play to Canada's speed. You're not going to get that at a World Cup, but this Copa competition a little bit not quite up to the level of a World Cup.
The fans are overwhelmingly against
the way
them.
the fans have definitely been against them. The way Argentina kind of slow played, walking out of the locker room at halftime in their opening game. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
That swagger.
That'll
moment.
happen again tomorrow
By the way,
night.
that's
sure.
but it shouldn't happen in a real tournament.
I agree, but Canada better. You don't even think about coming out tomorrow night.
Yeah.
Like if I'm Canada, if I'm Jesse Marsh, I'm saying don't even think about it. Let them go out first.
well,
Like just sit and wait. Game
put
of
the ball-
chicken.
no,
I don't
put
care.
the ball in play.
Or put it in play.
Yeah.
But the refs aren't going to allow that. Like
Well,
that's not going to
should.
happen. I understand that.
That's the way it works at real tournaments.
You're preaching to the choir. Same thing the other night. Like we saw when the keeper goes over and smacks the ball out of, I can't
That
remember who was trying to
ridiculous.
inbound it. Like there was a blatant yellow card and the ball goes in the net like 30 seconds later,
I
real
know.
play. It's absurd. But yes, I agree. Ideally that would happen, but we know Argentina's going to run the show, and the refs are never going to allow the
No.
ball just to be kicked off. So go in there knowing that and just say, screw it, we'll play a game of
well, maybe you do the
chicken.
opposite. Maybe
Yeah.
you say,
well,
wait
let's
till
have a
they're on the
standoff.
field, then
we're
we'll
not
come out.
even moving until
Yeah.
they get out there.
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to see out of Canada tomorrow night. Let
Well-
Messi walk out there first, and he can do back and forth and stretch for a bit, and then the boys will come out.
I love
Yes,
how
he
fired
does.
up
I gotta
you're getting
have that
about
tomorrow
the
night.
football. I love how
I'm
fired
jacked,
up
man.
you are
I'm right
about
on it. I'm right on. I
Jesse
love that. It was a
Marsh-
great match the other
Jesse
night.
Marsh might have that kind of swagger.
I'd like to see it.
He does, though.
I'd like to
He
see it.
does not
Screw it.
give
Screw
many
Argentina.
bleeps,
What do you need
does he?
Argentina to run the show for? Who are you?
Yeah.
You're in the Jets locker room. You go out first.
Why not? Why don't you try it? I mean,
That's what I would do.
it's a push and pull, right? It's all gamesmanship.
That's right. You know exactly what
And they won the
Argentina's doing.
gamesmanship battle. Like the way they came out, I think they intimidated Canada in that opening game. Like it was going pretty well for Canada at halftime.
I agree.
And then it all went kaput very
Yeah.
shortly after. Argentina slow played the walkout, and they came out with some serious
They were
swagger.
flying in the second half.
It was scary to watch.
Yeah.
You knew something. You knew the tone had changed.
And again, they're in one tomorrow. Argentina
Yes.
is
Yeah.
The real deal.
They're the world champs. They're the best team in the tournament. It's going to be very challenging, but it does feel like a success to get to this point. But again, that's what we keep talking about, knocking down these barriers of moral victories, and we're just happy to be here moments. You
Well-
just keep pushing the envelope tomorrow night.
How much more confident do you feel in tomorrow night's matchup, just what you've seen from the soccer team in the last couple of weeks? How much more confident do you feel in tomorrow's game than you did at the tournament opener when they played Argentina?
Significantly more.
And I think that just goes to
Just
prove
from
how well
Canada's
they've played.
perspective.
100%.
Yeah,
Yes. How they
like Argentina's still a beast, and they're a huge favorite. Like that's not going to change
No.
based on good vibes over a 2-week tournament or 3-week tournament.
Hey,
But
man,
they deserve to feel better about themselves.
I'd feel more confident if Canada's goalie would actually stay in the net.
That would be helpful. Like that one, that was a brutal goal to give
Yeah.
up the other
Oh,
night.
Yeah,
And
Jesse Marsh came out and took credit for that, though, which I do appreciate. He came out and he even said, like, it was one of the first things he made it a point to discuss that. He said, hey, that goal was on me. So I looked back right when they scored that. Apparently, he had instructed Crepo to be aggressive in that game.
he
Make
was
sure you're
aggressive after that goal went in. He was out of his
Which, if that's the
Cage.
game plan, I guess you got to respect it. Stick
Yep.
it to the game plan no matter what.
poor defending too. It wasn't
Well, yeah,
well
that
defended.
was a loss. I mean, you got to win that battle to the ball first and foremost. But at that point, but I did like that Marsh, took accountability for it, and that's what you can tell. This team's playing for him. Like he's been here for
easy to
for
do it
two
after a
months.
win. But yes, he's clearly had an impact on this team, and we'll see what happens tomorrow night. So
excited.
Matthew Shinetti will join us later in the afternoon. Masai was speaking. I guess Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickly officially announced today. Like that's kind of the theme of the day is overwhelming optimism, right? Where Canada's feeling very optimistic. Masai's guaranteeing wins. Guaranteeing. Let's hear this clip. He sat down with Matt Devlin, and this is what he had to say about the future of the Raptors.
We'll win. We'll win again here. And it's guaranteed we're going to win again here. I have every confidence that we're going to win in Toronto again. For me, when we interviewed Scotty in the draft, I said it before, in the small amount of time we had, mentioning win. We won here, we won in high school, when we won here. And that was all that was on his mind. I never forget, too, after the All-Star, I was talking to him with Coach, and he said, and I said, you can't be a one-time All-Star, right? You have to keep going. And he said, he looked at me and Coach, and he said, we have to win here. Yeah, so his mind did not even go to the second All-Star or the next All-Stars. He just went straight to winning.
Okay. How are we feeling about that?
Well, they had 25 wins last year
Right.
and 57 losses by my calculations. So what is he guaranteeing here? We'll win another game again. We'll win 35% of our games instead of 30% of our
You
games.
don't think that was a championship proclamation?
Is that what that was?
That's how I
mean,
took it. Maybe
what
not next year, but this is the core he believes will win a championship. That's what I took from it.
Yeah. Well,
Wow.
if he thinks that, he's wrong.
This ain't a court.
This
It's
court
gonna-
not winning
agree
a
with that.
championship. Yeah,
I agree with that.
And Masai knows that. Masai, listen, what he said about Scotty is he's the foundational piece. Like they're investing in Barnes, and you just gave him, 5-year deal, a lot of money. He's your guy. You turned over the previous core, and you have to believe in him. You have to believe in him, and I think that's the right thing to sell is winning, which Masai can do that as well as anybody. But I like Quickly. I like R.J. Barrett. But a 3-pack of Barnes, Barrett, Quickly is not winning in the NBA.
No.
That's not
even
winning
close.
a championship.
Not even
Yeah.
close.
Everyone understands that.
Yeah.
So they need to find, I think, probably two more pieces that push quickly and RJ down that can match with Barnes before you can really get to that point.
Well, and here's the question. Is he being too impatient here? Should they have held back and tanked again? In a draft that's got this Cooper Flagg kid, you win the lottery. Like, this guy could be transformational.
Don't you think they're going to tank anyway? Like,
Well,
isn't this,
but
like,
they can't be that bad.
But it's the
Like,
teams
their
in
lottery odds are not going to be that bad.
They're like where the Leafs were for years. Like, they're a team that's too good to be a bottom 5 team in the league to win the lottery or have a good shot at the lottery, but they're not good enough to do any amount of damage. They'll compete for a wild card spot or a play-in spot. They're just in that mushy middle. Like, that's where they're at. And by not tanking, you're also not going to get that generational piece or another foundational piece. Like, you're likely not to get it, I suppose.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It feels like they're you're right. They're in the middle of the pack in terms of pushing for a play-in spot, not top 6 in the East. Like, I don't think anyone's expecting that. Yeah. So you're thinking, could you get somewhere between 7 and 10? I think it's more likely you're fighting for like 9 or 10, the way this roster is currently constructed. But it does feel more likely to me, if you give me an option, do I think they could finish bottom 2 or 3 in the East or get into that top 6? I think it's way more likely they're still bottom 2 or 3 in the East. Like, I don't think their roster's that good. I don't see how they're overly even middle of the ground, middle of the pack, 35, 36 win team. That seems ambitious to me.
Yeah, except that Detroit is an elitely bad team.
And Brooklyn's doing it now.
Like, Washington is exceptionally bad. You know, Charlotte, not getting much better anytime soon.
Okay.
You know, so you start looking at it, you're like, yeah, you'd love to be down there, but it's hard going to ball that fast. Like, those are some very bad teams.
Okay.
And you've got a really good player, Scotty Barnes. Like, you've got a top-notch, you know, borderline All-NBA guy there if he gets to where you want him to get to. You got Quickly who plays hard. You got Barrett who's going to play hard. You got a bunch of guys who are going to play hard. You got a coach that's going to demand they play hard. Like, that's the kind of team that's going to win 35, 36, 37 games. And that's not the recipe for straight to number 1 lottery odds.
Right. Yeah, I'm not going to argue against that. Like, Brooklyn is all in on a tank. Like, Brooklyn is committing.
There's the other one. I forgot about Brooklyn.
Brooklyn is committing to being awful for 3 or 4 years.
If we look at the 5 teams,
and they won't be as bad as those teams.
Didn't make the play-in last year in the East. It's Brooklyn, Toronto, Charlotte, Washington, and Detroit. Of those teams, Toronto, I would say, is the best of the bunch. So you're probably not looking at a bottom 4 team. That's just in the East. And then now you're competing with Atlanta. You know, Chicago just moved on from
Atlanta. Looks like they may be making that decision to go the other way.
Yeah, Chicago may be going the other way.
Chicago might be going the other way.
So
you know,
they just traded Caruso. They got rid of DeMar. They're not getting any better.
No.
So they're going from 39 wins down into the 30s. Or
so the question
20s.
is, if that were, and I wouldn't argue against that plan. Yeah. I think it's in their best. They're not going to be competitive this year. Okay, maybe they get 10th or something, and they'll sell that as growth, and the future is now, and this is great, and winning atmosphere and winning culture and all that. And I can understand there's certainly some truth to that and some benefit to that if you don't want to bottom out. And I understand why, and I would feel the same if I was in Masai's shoes or MLSE's shoes. You do not want to get into Piston territory.
No.
Where you are a joke for like a decade, basically. Like that's terrifying for anybody, and they are trying to avoid that as much as possible. But that would suggest they're looking into the rear view, saying we don't want to be that, as opposed to looking to the forward to the Celtics or whatever and say we want to be that.
Right.
And how did the Celtics get there? Tatum 3rd overall, Brown 3rd overall. Now a lot of that was the Brooklyn picks, and there was some. It wasn't just them being awful.
But what did they do? They parlayed a championship team, took the pieces of a championship team in 2008.
Yeah.
Parlayed it into 2 guys who became the core of a championship team in 2024.
Right.
So Masai missed the step of parlaying the pieces of a championship team into those kinds of players.
And that would speak to an impatience of being willing to say, this may take a decade to get there,
right?
But at least you get there, right? There's a better chance you will get there. There's no guarantee any plan's ever going to work, but it's more likely you're going to get there if you draft 2 or 3 like studs. I mean, that goes without saying.
And you got Danny Ainge as your chief scout.
Yes.
Danny Ainge had a pretty good eye.
He helped.
Picking, he did a pretty good job of picking the best player in both those drafts.
Well,
ask the Lakers and Sixers about that.
Well, I had a question for you, Dave. How much do you think Keith Pelly plays a role in here where it's, I'm here, we're not going to be terrible for 5-6 years, you better put together a decent product.
Huge, AB. I mean, you can't underestimate the presence of Keith Pelly. I mean, he's the new energy in the MLSE fold, right? If they kind of fell off a little bit, they didn't really have much leadership from the top for the past handful of years. You heard that Shanahan and Masai didn't even show up to a lot of the company functions that were run by the CEOs at the time. When Keith Pelly calls a meeting, Masai and Shanahan show up, right? Like he commands their respect. He commands attention. And now, not unlike the Blue Jays, what are the folks at MLSE doing right now? They're dumping $300+ million into their arena. So tanking product might not be, a perfect time for such a thing, right? Like I'm not saying they're saying you better get better quick. I'm saying they're saying we're going to be raising prices to be commensurate with our new facilities that are going to, blow you out of the water with the great experience we're going to give you for a price. And so, yeah, I think Pelly's a huge factor here. And the fact that maybe Masai feels that pressure and understands that, hey, he's getting deeper into his deal, hasn't done much since the championship, one playoff series win to speak of, and, there's pressure.
Yeah, and I think I think a lot of it's self-inflicted as well. Like Masai's always been a guy trying to move forward. Like he was adverse to blowing it up when he should have a year or two ago.
Yeah.
Like they should have moved long. He waited too long.
Van Vliet,
and Van Vliet left for nothing. And OG, they got a good price. I mean, obviously they believe in Quickly, they believe in Barrett. It was an awful trade for Siakam, but he waited too long. Like when you look at it, Siakam just signed like a max extension, and he's a primary piece of a team that made it to the Eastern Final.
What'd they get for him?
And they got nothing, basically. Like they opted into Brown, and they got some picks that were not that good.
Yeah.
So it was not a good trade, and it was because they waited too long and because he wanted to believe. So I just don't know how else they could have played this offseason. Like it was a formality, Scotty was getting his deal. And when they acquired Quickly, it was a formality, Quickly was getting his deal. So maybe the full-blown scorched earth was never going to be a part of the program anyway. But you can manipulate it in the NBA. And we've seen this team do it. They did it when they were in Tampa. You get into the final 20 games, you're really not going so well. All of a sudden you go 4-16.
That's right. That's what produced Scotty Barnes.
That's exactly what produced Scotty Barnes. And what almost produced them saving their pick this year. But by all accounts, next year, you mentioned the one kid that's getting a lot of love, but there's what I've read recently is 4 or 5 kids that could be
decent depth.
True studs at the top of the draft.
The next
year.
2 years is even what I've heard. Like the next 2 drafts, like this is when you want to be in that rebuild mode because you can get a decent player in the top 5 of this year and next, and it's going to be tough for the Raptors to be a bottom 5 team just based on where they're at.
Yeah, but that means you better draft, develop, and they've done a pretty good job of that over the years, finding guys that are undrafted, second round, later in the first round. When they built their championship team, it was a huge part of the conversation. No pick in the top 15.
Right.
That's right.
And they did something that not a lot of other teams have done.
And that pipeline kind of dropped off, right?
Yeah.
With the Malachi Flynn's of the world instead of Desmond Bain and not, obviously Christian Coloco, different circumstance, a medical problem, but you obviously don't get anything out of that
Didn't
pick.
work
You don't.
out.
Yeah, you haven't been able to find those second rounders that maybe some other teams have found and thought you had one in Delano Banton, didn't turn out. So, the magic kind of wore off. The shine is off Masai. So it's good to see the swagger back when he's up there on the stand with Devlin saying, "We will win again, I guarantee it." The swagger's there. Just he doesn't have the team to go with you yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's going to take time. It's going to take probably years.
Is there going to be pain, Brian? Is there going to be pain?
I mean, it started last year. There was pain. 25 wins. Like Masai said it. He's like, that was an awful year.
And by the way, following up a year that he called unwatchable.
That was unwatchable.
I mean, so it's 2 years in a row where he didn't enjoy it and nobody else did.
Nobody has in a couple of years. So, they've invested in Scotty. They've invested in Quickly. But we'll see. We'll see what comes.
And it hurts a Raptor fan a little bit when you see, obviously OG Anunoby's a special case because the day OG Anunoby's 100% is, a very rare day. And we all know he doesn't like to play if he's 99 or 98% because he's got to wait. He's got to make sure he's 100. But still, like when he showed up in New York, he was like heralded as a savior, right? And he was the perfect Tom Thibodeau player. And New York's going to be a real team. Now, whether or not OG Anunoby can make it to the finish line of a playoffs is another matter. But
Couldn't do it this year.
and then you see Siakam getting a max deal, and you see
Van Vliet's doing what he's doing.
Van Vliet doing what he's doing. That's a team that has a chance to make a jump. And what are you left with, right? What are you left with? You're left with, you're hoping Emmanuel quickly becomes this high upside guy, high ceiling, Brisket-esque.
Brisket type player. On
Brisket
the
type player.
Brisket, though, I don't know if he's quite Brisket.
Yeah.
Has he ever been used in
Problem.
the same sentence as Brisket? I don't know. Not many
Possibly
players
not.
have. Not many
Possibly
players
not.
have.
But yeah, no, exactly. You're banking on growth.
You're
And
banking on internal
You're
improvement.
paying for it. Yeah, exactly.
How'd that work out for the Blue Jays?
Not so great.
Not great. Not
so
great,
great.
Dave. Not
Yeah,
great.
it's a weird energy in the city right now. We'll continue to discuss it. But we got Canada, Argentina tomorrow night. Jays are in San Francisco starting a series tomorrow night. That'd be a cool series to go to. If you're a Blue Jay fan, get down to San Fran. Be an awesome, awesome series to be a part of. And the Leafs just wrapped up their rookie camp. Easton Cowan, by all accounts, looked really good. Fraser Minton looked good. Their offseason is basically settled now. Mark Masters will join us on an update from camp. What does he make of Cowan's future here in Toronto? Could it start in the fall? And we'll just go around the Leaf room and take a look at what else could be on the horizon throughout the summer here with Mark Masters. He'll join us. Dave Feschuk's in here from the Toronto Star. Michael DiStefano, a.k.a. Al's brother. I'm Bryan Hayes. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. OverDrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. We'll get to our best bets later in the afternoon. Bryan Hayes, Dave Feschuk, Al's brother in here. Leafs development camp took place this week. And really the story is Easton Cowan. I don't think you can supply Leaf fans with enough Easton Cowan content.
Yep.
With how well he played this year, what he did in London, the story of him, the fact that it was perceived as a reach when they took him, like it was based on the boards of basically everyone else.
Yeah.
And his general approach. He seems like a very confident kid. That's been a theme for the first hour, is presenting confidence. And Cowan appears to be presenting it. And I like it. And I like the idea of him showing up in the fall and saying, I don't want to go back to junior, because that's his option. You're either play
Right.
for the Leafs or you're going back.
There's a spot for him if he can earn it. There's a top 9 role on this Maple Leaf squad. As it's presented, there could be more moves,
Yep.
but right now there's a chance.
On that left side,
Yep.
if that's where he's going to play. I don't know if he's going to be a center in the NHL. Is he going to play on the left wing? I would think he probably transitions in on the left side. And as of now, you've got Domi, who probably plays over there. Nyes is going to play there. And they're trying to figure out what else fits. And a man that's always on the scene with the Maple Leafs joins us now. Here's our Maple Leaf reporter, Mark Masters. Mark, what do you make of Easton Cowan at camp and his mentality going into the big camp in September?
I loved it. For a lot of the reasons you were just saying. We talked to him at the start of the camp, and you could feel he was even more confident at the end of it, right? At the start, he was kind of suggesting, I'm going to take what I learned back to London next season. And then at the end of it, he's just like, well, I know what I'm focused on for the rest of this summer, and I know what my goal is, and I want to make the team. So that's what you want to hear, I would think. And, Haley Wickenheiser, she's being very clear. He's very close, and he's going to make a push. And I'm not going to count him out, even though it's tough as a teenager to make that jump for a team that's got championship aspirations. This guy, he's defied the odds and exceeded expectations every level. He made the World Junior team as an underager this year. Most outstanding player in the OHL, MVP of the playoffs. He should be confident, and I'm excited to see. He'll be down at Hockey Canada's summer camp later this month. So I'm excited to see, even in the next few weeks, what sort of development he can put together and how he looks down there. And I'm sure he's going to give it his all at Leafs camp this fall.
Well, seeing what you've seen, Masters, and we've all watched him on the big stage of the World Juniors, and we've seen him in the OHL, CHL playoffs. What do you make of his chances? I mean, when I talk to scouts and talk to people that have really watched him closely, the one thing that keeps coming back is incredibly high motor and a relentless streak. That seems to be something the Leafs could use on the surface if he can kind of bring a man's body and some physicality to it. Do you think there's a chance that, he needs more time to develop the latter part of that, like the proper height, weight, physical specimen aspects, or do you think he's got enough of that now to maybe fit it in the NHL?
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be kind of a question that's answered at camp, how he fares against the bigger guys. stronger guys. He was talking about being reliable. Clearly, they've given him the marching orders. He knows what he has to show at camp. It's, Wickenheiser said it's the defensive side. That's going to be the determining factor because they know they have the engine, the determination. He's shown the offense. And the question is, can he bounce off checks properly? Can he get the puck in at the blue line? Can he get it out at the blue line? Those are the areas. Cowan called it game management. So I don't know. I don't have an answer on that. He looked fine, of course. He looked really good against the players that were at this development camp. We'll see how he looks against the older guys at the full main training camp. But he held up all the way to the end of last year's training camp, and he was playing so well that at the end of that first preseason game, they had him out 6-on-5 with Matthews, Marner, and the big boys. So we'll see. We'll see. That is the question. I don't have an answer for you now. But he looked pretty good this week or last week. I will tell you that.
Mm-hmm. Mark, what did you make of the Leafs' first-round pick from this year, Ben Danford? Did he jump out to you at all this weekend?
Yeah, I think he was as advertised. I thought what was interesting with him is that both he and the organization are talking about how he's kind of got this untapped offensive potential. Of course, he was billed as this defensive defenseman. The numbers don't jump off the page at you, but he made a very nice play to set up the first goal in the scrimmage on Sunday, and he thinks he can do more of that because he's a smart player. High hockey IQ, he was telling us, and that's what Wickenheiser was saying. So that's what I'm intrigued to see. He'll go back, obviously, to Oshawa, and that's what he's focused on is can he build that part of his game? Because 200 feet, the defensive side, he seems like he's got that. Of course, Cowan was singing his praises as a guy who was tough to go up against in the OHL last season. So to me, as advertised, mature kid to talk to, and I'm interested to see if he can build that offensive side.
With Mark Masters, our Maple Leaf reporter. So when you're around the camp, I mean, this is about young players, their future, trying to make their way in, but how much of the big club kind of hovers over the whole organization and specifically all the cries for change to the core and what are they going to do with Marner and Tavares and the captaincy? Does that just get cleared out completely when this camp goes on, or is there an elephant in the room, so to speak, with the big club just whenever you're around anything Maple Leaf related?
No, that really wasn't hanging over last week that I could sense at least. It's those development camps. It's all about the young guys, and there's a lot of excitement in the air in the future, and there's not a lot of concern or worry about what's happening with the big club and the big issues facing them. The management was there, and Trey Living's watching. We saw Ruby that was there for a day, if not more, and all the management was there watching. So it's pretty cool, I'm sure, for the players to look up and see everyone, the decision makers, the key decision makers in the organization, kind of watching them, taking it all in. Obviously, most of the camp is free agents and lower round picks that probably aren't going to be in the NHL. But this is a great chance for them to kind of push the rock forward for them in their careers. So I didn't get a sense of that. I didn't really feel that. Obviously, we're talking to Wickenheiser, who's a bit removed from that element of things. So yeah, I didn't sense that even though that is there. Certainly in the press box we were talking about it, but I didn't sense it hanging over the camp.
Well, Mark, I mean, you cover this team on a daily basis. You're at every practice. You're in the room. You talk to these guys personally. You've gotten to know them, and it's been a big talking point over the course of the last couple of weeks here in Leafland, I suppose. Like, as someone who's in there and you know what's going on, like, how do you think a change of captaincy would be received within the room?
That's a tough one. How would it be received? I think it'd be awkward, of course. How could it not be? Because if you're taking it away from, I guess, Tavares, giving it to Matthews, all we've heard is how close everybody is, and I can't imagine that wouldn't be awkward. So I'm sure there would be a period of that. And then I'm not sure how. I mean, it's a bit of a wild card, right? Like, I assume you're doing that to try and shake things up. Or does it get Matthews to another level? What does that even look like? I guess it would be in the playoffs. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a bit of a wild card to me. I don't know what sort of impact that would have behind the scenes.
So when you're up in the press box at developmental camp, what's the consensus, Masters? I mean, we know the calls for change, but the core four, and we know that the players hold all the cards in those conversations. Is the ensuing change, the change that came without changing the core four, the shored up D, the goaltending compromise with these two guys who really haven't played a whole lot in the NHL to put together, and whatever else they've done. What are people making of it? What are you making of it? Is it enough to sell change with a new coach and that kind of roster tweak?
Well, I mean, I don't know if they have to sell it. It is what it is, right? It's what are people? The people are going to come to the games, and people are going to get excited when Austin Matthews pots in a couple of goals, and maybe I don't know if he's going to start the season with back-to-back hat tricks again, but I will say this, it didn't feel like everything is on the table off season. So I can tell you the last time I was in the press box for, locker clean out, and then, the Keith Pelly presser with Shanahan and Trey Living a week later, it felt like something significant was going to happen. And while they have made the signings and reworked the defense and extended Wool and brought in Stolars, so to kind of, shore up the goaltending, it does not feel like obviously there's been the big changes that it felt like was coming when we saw what happened on the bench in Game 4 and Marner slamming his gloves down and some sniping and what we heard with the everything's on the table. So we were just reflecting on that in the press box, how it ended up being an off season right now that just felt like a lot of the other ones during this era.
Right, very routine. Good moves, and, like every team in the league, Florida's going to make adjustments, San Jose's going to make adjustments, and every team in between. The Leafs are no different. But it's obviously, outside of Berube is a change. I mean, that is a substantial change. You turn your coach over and you bring in a new coach. That represents something obviously drastic and different. But in terms of the identity of this team, it hasn't changed, I think, in the eyes of the average fan. You can point, Tanev being here is exciting. I'm curious to see what Stollarts brings. I think they're good moves. I think they're good moves, what the Leafs did here, and I think they've addressed a fair amount of issues that I think needed to be addressed. Are there more? Of course, but every team in the league has more. But if you were basically standing pat until substantial change happened to the roster, I think you're going to be standing pat for a long time.
Exactly.
It's July 8th now, and I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think the Leafs
like
are banking on that, Mark. I think they're waiting for the dust to settle, people to get into summer. The Leafs go away for a couple of months. It'll be awkward or challenging possibly when they arrive to camp, and there'll be a lot of questions, and it might be intense. And
for a day or two.
And then they'll start playing, and like you just pointed out, they're banking on just the season playing out and people just kind of easing back into the routines. And
right.
I guess it's not the worst strategy, because history would suggest in this city and with this fan base, that's not a bad idea, because that's usually what works. People
Right.
will.
It'll
They're not
lure us
going to
back
completely
in all
turn.
the time.
Yeah, it's just like this. Like Toronto's not a riot town.
No.
You know what I mean?
Never has been.
It never has been. I think they know it, and they're just banking on it working next year. And if it does, they'll be given all the credit in the world. And guess who's going to celebrate? All the fans that demanded change. They're going to be right there enjoying the ride.
True.
But we'll see what happens, and I'll believe it when I see it, like everyone else.
Well, the big question is Marner, right? Last year going into the season with Nylander not extended, Nylander, all the comments on the first day of camp, he's built for this market. He doesn't mind it. He'll be fine. And he sure enough came through with a career year to start the year and earned his extension. Marner, everyone's different. And Marner, it's felt like at times the market has gotten to him. So that's the question is on the first day of camp, that will be the story if things continue like this, if he's not extended, if he's still here, which it seems to be the case. How does he answer those questions? And if he doesn't get off to a good start, how does that all play? Does it become more frustrating for him? Because obviously he is a pretty key part of this whole thing. And if they're going to get where they want to go in the playoffs, and they're going to need him to play better than he has, are all going to have to play better than they have. So that's the different kind of wild card element to it, right? Is how will Marner respond to the situation that's unfolding.
And we'll find out in a couple of months. Enjoy the rest of the summer, Mark. What's your plan? You got Wimbledon stuff. You got the U.S. Open coming up. You're on the tennis beat. What's the plan here?
Yeah, I'm going to do some tennis interviews, and I'm looking forward to the event in Toronto. Actually, Marner's got his charity event this week, so I'm curious to see if there'll be any sort of media availability as part of that. Usually there is. But we'll see how that unfolds. Zach Hyman's got his charity event coming up. So there's the golf kind of charity event circuit I'll be popping in and out of, trying to stay busy, catching up on some time off. But yeah, I'm gearing up like that. You go to development camp, you talk to Cowan, you get pumped up to see what happens. Like, I'm already kind of ready to go. The Leafs have been off for forever, it feels like, right? Like, I couldn't believe that Game 7 just happened of the playoffs. I was thinking Hyman's got his golf tournament. I'm like, oh my goodness, did he have any? It's quite a quick turnaround from Game 7, devastating loss. So I'm ready. I'm kind of feeling ready to roll. I'll be at that Hockey Canada camp, which will be great. They didn't do one last summer, and I think it hurt them when they lose in the quarterfinals. So I'll be down there with Cowan and company in Windsor, and then Plymouth, Michigan for that. And before you know it, we're going to be talking about training camp. It's crazy how quickly it goes. Yeah.
All right, Mark. Well, enjoy yourself, buddy. We'll do it again soon. Thank you for this.
No worries. Thank you, guys.
Mark Masters, our Maple Leaf reporter. And Cowan's going to have to earn his way onto this team. Eventually, he's going to be a Leaf. I think we all feel good about that. And I wouldn't be shocked. You look at Marner. Marner's pathway could be similar, where Mitch was drafted in 2015. He went back to London, had a spectacular year, and then the next year he broke in.
Yeah.
And now it was syncing up with Matthews' arrival, Willie showing up, Hyman, Brown, Kapanen was here, Babcock was here, Kessel was out. Like, it was a true new era. Let's get them all in. This is a bit different. But I will say, from a PR standpoint, if I'm the Leafs, I'm rooting for this because it's a difficult room to read right now in terms of the Leaf market, the Leaf fan base, where I think a lot of Leaf fans are very disappointed with what continues to happen. And a lot of Leaf fans, crying for some sort of change, some not. There's a number of them that are like, hey, let's just keep rolling with this, whatever. Everyone has their own viewpoint. But I think collectively, one thing that every single Leaf fan loves, and one story that always lands and always sells, is the new kid showing up.
Yeah.
And the new kid showing up with great potential gets this city and this market, and I'm sure every fan base around the league buzzing, where, like, same thing with Matt Savoy. Like, Savoy will show up in Oilers camp, but it'll be like, what's Savoy doing? Is he going to make the team? Can he play? Could he be with McDavid? And that's an Oilers team that was in Game 7 of the Cup final that everyone loves and collectively loves their offseason.
That'll be a big storyline going into camp.
Big storyline. Where here, like, if you're the Leafs, you can't force it, but if he has a great camp and he makes the team, that will be a huge bonus because, like, the mosquitoes will just go that way. You know what I mean?
That's
naturally, people will be like, what's Cowan doing? As opposed, like, if I'm Mitch Marner, I'm like, I need this guy to make
enable
the team.
this kid.
Please have a great
kid up.
Because no one's going to want to talk about anything else.
Well, and Fraser Minton, too, right?
Yeah, and Minton's a part of that program. He doesn't pop as much as this Cowan.
He doesn't, but he did last.
Yeah, he did. He had a great camp.
Last fall, he was the
Great
story
camp.
of the camp in a lot of ways.
That's right.
So, and he got to play a couple games. And so, look, you're right. That is, in a salary cap league, you need those guys to come up and make next to nothing and contribute that energy that I think Easton Cowan can contribute. Like, that's what people say about this kid, right? Like, that he just never stops.
Yeah.
And
great motor.
And I'm not sure he's got the body yet to do that at the NHL level for 82 games.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you worry about that. You don't want to rush a kid in, ask him to throw himself around like he throws himself around. And, there could be bad consequences for that if it's done too soon.
Very true. And that's the difference. Like, when Marner showed up, he was so shifty and smart. Not that Cowan's not, but Marner knew his game.
Never got hit.
He never got hit. He still hasn't been hit. And Marner was like a supreme talent.
And he was a star for like 3 years. Like, Marner had been a star in the juniors for, like,
yes.
You all knew what he was.
You knew Mitch was coming.
Cowan just kind of came out of the blue.
Yeah.
The final, 3 months, I think you can look at 3-4 months leading up to his draft, had an outstanding OHL championship. And then all of a sudden he gets taken in the first round, big surprise pick. And then he comes out the next year, wins MVP, not only in the regular season, but then also in the playoffs. It's like, whoa, this kid came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
All right, the expectations have now changed on him, but what's the ceiling now? No one knows.
It's up to him,
Brisket.
I guess, to figure that out. It could be Brisket.
He's Brisket. He is Brisket right now. He's
ceiling.
got a high ceiling right now, and we still got to find out what that is.
I like it. All right. We got a lot to get into here. Jays weekend, Canada, Argentina tomorrow night. Dave Feschuk in here, Michael DeStefano, I'm Bryan Hayes. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. All right, Steve Phillips coming up on the Jays, taking 2 of 3 over the weekend. The Yankees continue to fall apart. The Sox took 2 of 3 from them. They are freaking out in New York, as they should be.
Yeah.
Like, Baltimore keeps cruising. They're still in a wild card spot. Like, they're still comfortably 6 games up, I think. But Houston's coming.
Yeah.
Kansas City's kind of there. It's a battle for New York.
It is, and it's funny. I think I was in for cause last week, and we were taking a look at some of the betting odds over on FanDuel, and I think it was pretty close. I think Baltimore was only favored like minus 140 or something like that, which isn't incredibly favored odds when you're talking about the division. And at that point, they were 2 games up on the Yankees, but the Yankees continue to free fall. Baltimore, they're doing well. I mean, I hammered that bet. I'll tell you, I think Baltimore's going to run away with the division.
Feels that way.
If the Yankees keep doing what the Yankees are doing here. And, it's not like the Jays or the Sox or the Rays are of any concern.
The 2-horse race. It's
Absolutely.
either Baltimore or New York that's going to win.
That's the thing is, though, like the Yankees can be a free fall. The Jays can't make up any ground up.
No, they haven't.
And
they haven't at
what
all.
I mean.
In like
So
a month, they've made up like a game on the
Nothing.
Yankees.
They needed the Astros level streak.
Yeah.
That's what they needed, and they didn't get it.
you just
And it's
can't
not
lose.
coming.
It's not like winning 2 or 3. And
No, you got to
win a bunch in a row.
And they're in San Fran tomorrow. So we'll start teeing that up. Steve Phillips coming up into the next hour. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app.